I think I'm okay with the normal.
It's kind of at that point where it's just this ambient.
Okay. Yeah.
And so, okay, so just to recap, you want me to ask him basically if it's not Bigfoot, what else is it? Was that what?
If it's not Bigfoot, what intrigued you about it enough to?
Oh yeah, it's skeptic.
Right.
Skeptic.
Gotcha. Okay. So Tony, like me, I know that you consider yourself an open-minded skeptic.
Yeah.
So if the likelihood of Bigfoot down in this region is unlikely, what keeps drawing you back to the stories and the legends? Like, what do you find so intriguing about it if it's so unlikely?
Well, I've been a nature geek all my life, right? I'm a lifelong hunter, trapper, outdoorsy type. I like a good story, and I love a nature mystery, right? So I've been into it since I was a little kid. And the thing that really intrigues me, I've talked to so many sincere people, and I mean, if we get away from, say, Bigfoot, and look, I grew up as a little kid here in Southern Illinois on Black Panther stories. And my own father, who was a minister that didn't drink and didn't cuss and, very straight-laced guy, claimed to have seen a Black Panther. And I know lots of people that have. But we both know how many Black Panthers have ever been killed in the history of North America, where here it is, and that's none.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do with that? Are all those people lying? I don't think so. But as to what it is, I have no clue. And anyway, and that's what keeps me intrigued. I tell you what, I used to be a member of the BFRO, and I used to feel that maybe we were building up this picture of this unknown creature with each sighting getting a little more information. But there are a friggin' blue million camera traps out there. And yet nobody's got a Bigfoot photo that looks convincing or intriguing. We're always trying to convince ourselves that this blur or this juvenile bear or whatever, this could be a Bigfoot. If it was just a flesh and blood creature, we would be getting good data at this point. Whether we're talking Bigfoots or Black Panthers. I tend to think that all those are facets of the same phenomena that we don't understand yet.
So without that actual concrete evidence, do you think that it could be something that's just how our brains interact with reality, a more subjective experience that people are having?
Probably, maybe. I remember I once had a friend that he told me that he had an experience that if it would have been just slightly different, it would have puzzled him for the rest of his life. And he was driving down a dark road and he saw this tall, skinny thing with standing on two legs and upright, and it had a kind of deer-like head, but not quite. But he said, and then when it turned to run, I saw what it actually was, and it was a deer that he was exactly at the right angle. He was seeing the front legs, the neck, and the head, and no other part of its body at all in the dark. And he said it was so weird looking. And he said if I'd have just seen that, I would have been wondering about it for the rest of my life.
So more of a matter of perspective, really.
Yeah.
Often do you hear stories about it down here? How many, is it really common that people talk about it down here and want to believe in it down here?
So here in Southern Illinois, you've got a few accounts from the 1940s of somebody that saw an ape or a baboon or whatever. But I didn't grow up on Bigfoot stories here. When I grew up here, it was Black Panther, was the spooky thing in the woods or whatever. There's just not in my opinion, a track record of a Sasquatch-like thing in Southern Illinois over the long term. Is that kind of what you wanted?
Yeah. Are you familiar with the Big Lady story?
Yeah. I read Chad's book.
Oh, okay. Oh, it's Kevin's book.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you maybe discuss that what's your theories on why so many people claim they saw it?
Man, when we look at the Big Muddy Monster itself.
Have Kevin ask.
Okay.
So when it comes to the case of the Big Muddy Monster in Murfreesboro, do you think it's kind of more of the same, people mistaking it for something else? Or do you think there's something a little bit more concrete or more bizarre going on in that particular story?
I don't know. I mean, I really honestly don't. I talked to a guy once that was one of the with the sheriff where they trailed him to the barn and all that sort of thing. And that guy was as sincere and believable as anybody I think I've ever seen. But the Big Muddy Monster is so much like so many other monster flaps, like the Chicago kangaroos, for an entire summer, even police officers see this thing and then it just kind of fades away. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of that. I definitely don't think it's an unknown primate that we've just overlooked. I said that already, but.
That's okay. I have one. And this is as a biologist. I see a lot of references to escaped circus animals or escaped zoo animals being possible culprits for
Right.
for the spottings. And as a biologist, a creature, an animal like that, be it whether it's a circus ape or something like that, could it really survive, in the wild?
Okay.
Being that they're exotic, they're not in
Right.
the species, could they survive in this area long enough to be a potential candidate for that?
Yes.
Have Kevin said
Yeah,
that.
so I can. So you and I are both familiar with the common story of the escaped circus animal. I mean, whenever there's a Bigfoot story, they're always like, "Oh, it was a escaped circus animal. There was a circus train crash, and the gorillas got loose, all that kind of thing." We've heard
Black
that 100
Panthers
times.
too, yeah.
Yeah, panthers. So do you think, as cliche as it is, do you think that that's a possibility of what people were seeing, especially in the 70s when they had that flap of sightings? Do you think it could have been something like an escaped gorilla or a baboon? And could something like that even survive in this environment very long?
I do believe something like that could survive in this environment for months, if not years. Now, having said that, weren't the original sightings of a white creature?
They were.
Yeah. Okay. How many, let's just say gorilla, how many white gorillas do we know of? I think the one that was in the zoo in Spain, and that's it. And I think we also, you and I have discussed before somebody tried to document how many circus train wrecks have there ever actually been.
Yes.
And there's been, 3 with everything accounted for except one zebra once or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That just, as much as you'd like that to be the go-to answer, it just falls flat.
I mean, as logical as it is, it's also too convenient.
Right. And it's used for Bigfoot, for Black Panthers, for the Tuttle Bottoms monster, for everything.
And she knew it wasn't anything that should have been there,
Yeah, it wasn't a bear.
No, it wasn't a bear. It wasn't, no. And so that's why they believed her, and what Grandma said was true. So.
And they were able to go back and find the exact spot that she saw it too. So she was able to describe where exactly she saw it.
Well,
Close enough to find the print.
when you drive the area every day, yeah. And I mean, because it was right after you turned onto Route 3 off of Town Creek. So, I mean, she knew, you can say, oh, yeah, I can pinpoint it was right between these two signs, So, yeah, she was very familiar with the area. I mean, she lived here her whole life. So, yeah.
Did you have other things that you were, while I was gone, that you came up with?
Yeah, they touched on. We wanted to talk about the area, just describe what it's like out there.
Oh,
She
okay.
did that really well.
Yeah.
Maybe talk about what kind of wild. Oh, you get the deer and the
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's not.
You could maybe touch on just how the history goes. It's just ancient history in there. How it goes so far back, and there's some interesting features like the devil's backbone and things like that. Maybe.
Well, I told you we grew up in the woods. I mean, we grew up every weekend we were going to the woods. And my dad was one of the people who, for the longest time we have a couple sets of petroglyphs and, people from SIU would contact us to show them where they were because nobody knew where they were other than the locals.
Sure.
There along Fountain Bluff. And so we would walk from Gorham all the way around Fountain Bluff to get to Grand Tower. You would see the petroglyphs, and then in Grand Tower there's, the river and the bake ovens and Devil's Backbone Park. There's all kinds of stuff locally that most people don't know about. It's,
Long history.
locals know it, and, everyone else just dares to find out, I guess. So.
How about, do you think there's something still around, or do you think there's something that still can be around, that type of stuff?
I personally think there's probably something still around. Why wouldn't there be? I mean, I know there's no, photographic evidence, which you think with everybody holding cell phones, there would be. When I drive down Skeeter Park, I still think one of these days I'm going to see something. And I believe that I probably will. So.
Do you think that whatever it is that's out there is something physical, like an undiscovered animal, or do you...
Can you start over with that question?
Sure.
Go ahead.
So do you believe or feel that whatever's out there is some kind of undiscovered animal, like like the Bigfoot is like a flesh and blood creature, if that's what it is? Or are you more inclined to believe that it's something stranger, like almost like a ghost or a impression of the past, or something that's not necessarily flesh and blood?
Yeah. No, I believe it's probably flesh and blood. I know that there's been so many tests that they've done and ruled out things on evidence that people have found, but I still believe it's flesh and blood. I don't believe it's supernatural or whatever you would consider,
Do you think that it's perhaps clever enough to evade people all this time?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely clever. Whatever it's you think back in the 70s and then to now, I mean, people are still, there's been so many sightings and stuff over the years. I think that something does exist. It'd have to be very clever. So.
And that wasn't the only incident in the area, too.
No,
right?
there was other incidents. I believe around in the 70s, maybe, I remember that they had an escaped convict from Menard Penitentiary, which is in Chester, Illinois, just down the river. And I can remember, because my uncle worked for the state police, I can remember stories coming across of the helicopter was looking for the escaped convict, and they were searching the bluffs to the north side of Gorham, which we call Buttermilk Hill, Hog Hill, in that general vicinity. And they spotted something running along the top of the bluff, and they were like, no, this is too large to be a man. So it wasn't the convict they were looking for. No one ever confirmed or said what it was, but it was talked about. Yeah.
Interesting.
So.
Now, of course, at that point, I'm in bed, so I'm not a part of the story. This is all what I've heard from people, but I've heard it, from my parents and the neighbors and all that stuff over the years. They said, there's probably dozens of people standing out in our front yard, and they're hearing this thing run through the woods, and they're hearing this thing break brush and crash through the woods. And then they're also hearing the dogs behind it in the woods. Like they're hearing this thing farther ahead, and they're also hearing these dogs tracking it, in a different location, not that close to it, but kind of like, pursuing it. Mm-hmm. So eventually the dogs track it about, say, a mile or so roughly through the woods, and there's an abandoned barn out there. And from what the dog handler, the sheriff's deputies said, the dogs would not go in the barn. The dogs, which are supposed to be these bloodhounds that find people and track fugitives, will not go in the barn. And I think that kind of gave the deputies a little pause for a minute, because I don't think they really ever had that type of a situation before. So they decided what to do. They threw the dogs into the barn. They got a door open or something and threw the dogs in there. The dogs whimpered and were submissive and came right back out. The dogs did not want to be in there for anything. So eventually the deputies went in the barn, and when they went in the barn, they didn't find anything. They went in there and they lost the track. They don't know if it went out or what happened. It led to the barn, and that was pretty much it.
Wow.
Yeah.
You said you were 3 at the time?
I was 3. Yeah. So I was pretty young. In my mind, it was a big white ghost. To me, like, of course, it's a ghost. Of course.
Mhm.
I've seen ghosts on cartoons or whatever. That's what it is. I mean, as a 3-year-old, it was real clear cut. I was like, ghost, go inside. Okay, go to bed. I'm with my parents. I don't know what it was. And for me, that's okay. After it happened, there's a lot of newspaper articles. It got picked up by the Associated Press. It was in the New York Times in November of 73. And then the AP picked it up and went all over the world on the wire service or whatever they had in 1973.
Mhm.
So we have a big file of newspaper clippings, but it was kind of something that we didn't really talk about readily back then because I was a kid. And because, you don't want to get teased or whatever. I mean, I don't really remember people teasing me about it, but it was like one of those experiences that you had that you weren't clammed up completely about, but you didn't really just start conversations about it either. And it always kind of felt like people were talking about it, but when you came around, they stopped talking about it.
Yeah.
So, it was in a bunch of books and things. And then that was in the 70s. In the 80s, I graduated high school in 88. In about the late 80s, it had been long enough that Murfreesboro has an apple festival, which is like the big parade in September. It's the big festival. It's been going on forever. That they started promoting the Big Muddy Monster as part of the identity of Murfreesboro. And so then they had, first it was on a t-shirt. It was like, oh, what? The Big Muddy Monster. And then pretty soon there was a suit and there was a guy in a suit. And then it was fun. Then it was like, oh yeah, everyone thought it was kind of fun. And when we kind of made it into a cartoon, it was something that people could deal with. And it was and it had been long enough. It was kind of outside of most people's recent memory or whatever. And so people that had been born since or come along since looked at it a lot different. The people at the time, I think it scared them.
So they took it very seriously.
They took it real seriously, almost like an alien sighting or UFO or something, to where it was scary to them. And I think a lot of the people that were around here that heard it or heard something going through the woods or something, it's taken a long time for it to kind of have calluses built up around it to where now it's kind of funny or we talk about it or whatever. We didn't it wasn't like a big family secret or anything, but we wouldn't be out here doing this interview in 1975 or something.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of people that came to try to see what it was or track it. There was a lot of interest and stuff. And, it seems like society's kind of changed over. I don't know if I've just gotten older, but society's more accepting, it seems now. I think it's really hard for people to not know what something is. I think even now in our society, we have to know what everything is and we have to put a label on everything. And the unknown is seen as a threat to your knowledge, when I think it's okay to not know. I mean, in my mind, I'm a rational person. You think, well, yeah, it can't be a Bigfoot. I mean, come on, we would have found it, or there'd be, scat out there somewhere, or there'd be bones. I get all that. And if I was listening to me tell this story, that would be the first thing on my mind. And it is. But I also have this other experience of having been a part of it, even though I was so little, and knowing what it's like to be a person who was a witness of something and see how other people react. And I can see the walls that they build up and that they put up, and that it's almost like a big barrier to them learning anything new or having any new ideas. I mean, if I had to, my rational mind says, okay, it's a bear. It's a bear. It's, there's been bears lived here before, 100 years ago. And there's people who have bears as pets that don't talk about it or whatever, maybe. And there's bears that come across the river from where, Missouri or whatever. And I guess it could have been, but I don't know. The only thing that I can really say that I do have a strong belief about is I do not think it was human. I do not think a human being could be out here and get away from those dogs in this woods at night. I just don't think they could. And, it was the early 70s, and there was, a lot of the hippies and all that stuff. And people think, oh, it's somebody out there either playing a joke or having a bad, LSD trip or something like that. I can't really. I disagree with that one. I don't think that those bloodhounds and those police officers and all those people. I think they would have got you.
Well, it's interesting that one of your first, and I know that you were very young, but your first description of it, or the way you described it, was to being a ghost.
Yeah.
So do you feel that it was something physical or something perhaps not physical?
I think it was something physical, but I don't know. I mean, if it was not physical, that would explain a lot more about it getting away. I've always thought it was physical, but now that you say it, I don't know. I think the reason that I thought it was a ghost is because I think it was white. And I think as a 3-year-old, when I saw something big and white hanging out in the woods, walking in and out of the trees or whatever it was doing, that was the label. I'm doing the same thing that the adults are doing. I'm putting a label on it. I'm like, that's a ghost. I know what that is. That's a ghost. But like I said, I really do not remember seeing it. Like I remember like a second after seeing it. I really intensely remember, like when I come out here and see the back of that house, I kind of get chills. Like it kind of, to this day, I mean, the hairs are standing up on my arm. I mean, I haven't been out here in probably 30 years. And man, it's weird.
It is really cool being at the actual spot that took place.
Yeah, I can't remember anything else about being 3 years old, but I can remember that.
I'm fascinated when a story gets this much international attention and becomes a huge, infamous thing. I'm always curious of how it affects the lives of the witnesses, because you didn't ask for it. You were just in the right place or the wrong place. Did it affect you at all growing up? Or
it did. I treasure it. I mean, to be truthful, I feel like it was an awesome thing. I wouldn't trade it for the world. Like, I feel like me and the people next door and the police officers that tracked it and the people that saw it down at the park and the people that were parked down at the river that saw it, we all had an experience that's kind of like the movie Close Encounters or something. And over the years growing up, I was the youngest because I was only 3. And so as I got older in my job, I would still run into a few of those people, and it wouldn't come up every time. But when it came up, we would talk about it with each other and say things that we did not feel comfortable sharing with everybody else. And especially they didn't want to. Since I was so young, it was easier for me because I was like, I was 3. Like, I don't know. Like, what do you expect? Like, I'm not like this deep critical thinker at 3, maybe not even now. But for me, there was a bad side to it in a way of like, you do kind of feel different, or you do kind of feel like you can feel the people thinking you're crazy. You can tell that they think you're crazy. It takes a long time to get to a point where you're okay with that too. And you're like, I would probably think I'm crazy too. And so, cause like if you switch to a different, paranormal experience, I start thinking that, I do the same thing. I'm like, oh, ghost in your house? Oh yeah, okay, whatever. But it's the same, so it's weird. It puts you, it kind of like moves you around the chessboard, and you're like, okay, I see why you think I'm crazy. I might think somebody else is crazy, but it really happened, and I know there's a different side to it, so it's interesting like that to think about. But yeah, it's weird.
yeah. Want more?
I'm loving where we're going with it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great story.
Yeah. So,
you can get in a little bit. You're good.
I mean, it doesn't help your credibility, is what I'm saying, which I'm okay with that. I'm going to point my career and everything that I'm fine, and I've done interviews about it before and everything. I think my parents were protective of me as a kid, like I would be about my kids, because they don't want you to get teased, but I don't ever remember getting teased about it. I do remember playing in these same woods a lot growing up. We spent every day out here, and we didn't really worry about it. Like, even afterwards, we'd be out there, but every now and then I'd be out there by myself when other people went home or something. And like once every like 6 months or something, I'd just get that feeling again and be like, whoa, yeah, okay, what happened out here? Like, that was really weird. But it's not something I thought about every day growing up, but it would come up when other people brought it up, or it would come up like, once or twice a year, I'd think about it. So.
And what year did you move out of the house?
My parents moved here, I think, in 1971 when I was 1, and I lived here till 1988 when I graduated high school and went to college, and then they moved out of here in 1989. So I lived here from 71 to 89, and all of our neighbors were basically the same the whole time. There was a lot more jobs in Murfreesboro, it was a lot more stable. And, our whole neighborhood, we all grew up together and rode bikes out here, and we had a little mini motorcycle, and I'd ride out in the woods. There's a little pond down here, and like all the neighborhood kids would go down to the pond and fish. And, I had a great, childhood growing up here, and there was nothing bad about the Big Muddy Monster with my childhood. It's just, later in life, sometimes you got to kind of be a little bit more careful about stuff. But I'm glad it happened, really. It's nice to talk about it. It's almost like a cathartic a little bit to talk about with somebody that's interested, and you guys are very accepting about it. I feel comfortable, because a lot of times you feel like, well, I'm not going to share something if you're going to start fighting me or you're coming at me with an agenda. I have to have like a safe space to be able to tell you about it.
I think it's so fascinating that you said every once in 6 months or so you kind of get that shiver, because 2 years after your encounter, 2 other neighbor kids in 75 said they spotted it again, and your neighbor Nidra Green down there spotted it. So people were seeing it after you came forward.
Yeah.
Your parents.
Yeah. No, there was a bunch of sightings all around that same time. One theory that was bounced around for a while was if it's some kind of creature. If I remember correctly, it flooded that year in 1973, and the water was up really high. And the Big Muddy River is only like probably a mile or so through the woods here. There's also a sewage treatment plant for Murfreesboro right there. So I think the first sighting was maybe Riverside Park. I can't remember if it was Riverside Park or was the police down at the boat dock. But one of the ideas was that maybe the smell is the sewage or something. Maybe it's its own, musk or whatever it is. But maybe it would be that. So if it did flood and maybe it flooded something out of where it was, or it was on the move, or it was moving up, things use rivers as roads in the woods to get to places. That's a theory, I guess, too, but I don't know.
Yeah, so some people believe that potentially it could be living in caves in the area, and then when the river floods, the caves flood and forces it out to be seen.
Yeah, I could see that makes sense. I mean, and the Shawnee National Forest, if you go down the Big Muddy, it eventually empties into the Mississippi, but it goes through some pretty, for the Midwest, some pretty, remote areas, so there's definitely some land out there and some caves and woods.
And I love how the police took it seriously, where the police chief sent every officer on duty that they had out here that night.
Yeah, that is being the second or third sighting is what that was. And plus the police chief had his own sighting or whatever. So the police knew from their fellow officer that something was going on. It wasn't just a prank call. Yeah. So that's what got all the neighbors out, was, just like neighbors do, when one police officer shows up, you might look out the curtain a little bit and see like what's going on next door. But when like all of them show up, you're coming out to see what's going on. It was summer, and probably after dinner, probably an hour or so, hour and a half after dinner, and there was no phones or internet or anything, iPhone. So people are, looking for something to do, or more outside, more aware, more present in their area.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk about, have you seen any other large animals in this area when you were coming up, or maybe any other deer, anything? What's the largest creatures you've seen?
Why don't I ask him if there's any wildlife? Growing up, did you see any other known wildlife, deer?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've seen probably thousands of deer. I've seen bears out west. I've lived out in California and have been up to Glacier National Park and have hiked a lot and mountain climbed. And so I've been around probably 5 or 10 bears where I got within, 50 or 100 yards of them. I've never seen anything like that here. The biggest thing I've ever seen here are deer, cows, bobcats, stuff like that. Nothing close to this, though. I mean, nothing like this, and even, compared to the black bear, I've never seen grizzlies or anything like that, or brown bears, but black bears, this thing's way bigger than a black bear, like way taller and up on its hind legs and stuff. The bears I've seen, we were at Lake Tahoe and go to the cabin, and the bears, checking out the house when we come home. So you throw some rocks at it and it takes off, and it's probably like 300 pounds. I mean, I still wouldn't want to mess with it, but it's not, this thing's way bigger than that. So.
Let me rephrase that. Have you Have you ever spotted other known animals here when you were growing up in the yard? Turkey,
Yeah.
deer?
Deer, a lot of deer, stuff like that. I don't think I've ever seen any turkey here, but deer, squirrels, raccoons, you know, your normal forest creatures. No bear or anything like that, you know.
So nothing that could be even close to being 7 feet tall.
No, nothing like, and even the deer that you see, you know, you're talking like 70-pound animals or 80-pound, not even close. You know, there's really nothing that I can think of that you would ever mistake it for, or even like a human. You know, I mean, to see if I saw one of you guys out here or whatever, it wasn't that. It wasn't that. You know, it's way bigger than that. So,
And one of the stories circulating over the years was that some of the neighbors thought it might be living or visiting in a dwelling.
yeah, no, this is what I've heard growing up. So I don't know, you know, any of that for sure. But what I've heard over the years was Jack, my friend who was out here playing with me, lived 2 houses over. So that house was built. This neighborhood was started in the 50s. And so in the early 70s, I would say it was about like 50 or 60% full, where now it's probably like 90% full. So the neighbors directly next to us, the basement was not finished yet. The upper part of the house was finished, but the basement was still just the studs, and they didn't have the doors in, didn't have the windows in. What I heard growing up is that they think that right around the same time, either the same night or within a night or two, they went down to the basement where it was the studs, and there was mud and there was stuff down there, like something had walked through there or something had come in there.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some of that you don't know because people have kind of like war nerves or whatever, where now everything's a Bigfoot, and who knows? But I don't, you know, I know the people that had the house and stuff, and they're pretty reliable, conservative type folks that are not really prone to like making things up or anything. So, you know, they would know the difference between somebody walked in here with some muddy work boots or something came in here that crawled out of the big muddy river and came through here and like was checking things out. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, Joe.
Can you ask, do you think anything like that is still around? And did you ever wish you could see it again?
Yeah. You want to ask if it's around, then I'll ask you.
Yeah.
You wish you could have it.
So after all these years, do you think something like this is still around, like potentially still living out in the woods or down by the river?
I have no idea, to tell you the truth. You know, my rational mind says no, because everybody's got a camera in their pocket now and there'd be a video of it or something. But I still think that it's possible. I don't know what I don't think there's been any sightings for a long time. So that makes me think that it's kind of moved on or something's happened or it's not present or something. But I also think that as humans, we're pretty egocentric a lot of times. And we think that we know everything about everything and everything that's out in the woods or things. And so I definitely leave the door open that, you know, I could definitely be convinced I'm not convinced either way. I tend to like track towards it's probably not out there, but that doesn't mean it's not somewhere. You know, I think that maybe it's somewhere else or it's in another part of the woods or or maybe it's, you know, progeny or something is somewhere.
Is this something that you'd like to ever encounter again?
I would love to see it again. I would love to see it. Now, I realize I would probably be terrified if I saw it. Like, it's one of those things that it's all fun to think about where we're standing out here, but when it actually goes down, like, you know, it was never threatening and it was never aggressive.
You think it was mostly curious?
It was curious. I think what it was is what my mom told me over the years was that Jack and I were like making like yipping noises. We were going like yip, 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 like kids do. We were acting like dogs or doing something. I don't know, who knows what we were doing. But I think that whatever it was out in the woods, and we were a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and we're making some kind of like little animal noises. I think it came up to just kind of check us out and see what we were doing. And that when it got up here and I ran off or it saw the lights or something, it headed back into the woods and then kind of regrouped and decided to check out what was going on over next door. And it came up, you know, to the edge of the woods, but it never really came out of the woods. They went closer to it and it stayed in the woods. And then he started throwing rocks at it. And then it booked out through the woods. By that time, the dogs came and all that and chased it. So it's never been aggressive to anyone that I know of. So, I mean, I would love to see it again. I don't think that's probably going to happen, but if it did, I'd be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. Very good. Why do you think the story is so fascinating and has lasted for this long?
It's fascinating because at the time, the police department handled it in a credible fashion. It wasn't brushed off. And we have the entirety of the Big Muddy Monster case file on the City of Murfreesboro website. And you can view the photos that were taken. The police chief at that time called in the entire police department, and they went out looking for what this was because there were credible reports and there was evidence. There was impressions in the ground. Were they footprints of some sort of Sasquatch? I think that's very much inconclusive from the evidence, but the people who reported it did not particularly have great motivation to want to report it, and it seemed that their fear was very much real. And the subsequent follow-up reports were all from people that were not seeming to be making things up. You know, it is difficult for people that are not professional actors to fake terror. And when you read the reports, these folks were terrorized by whatever it was that they saw. And that's what I think made it have such a lasting impression on the community.
Awesome. Why do you think the history and the legend itself is important to your community?
It's important to the community on a practical sense because it is a marketing tool. Folks are interested in these types of legends. And frankly, I think one of the things I despise the most about the technology age is that it's killed a lot of the romance of the American story and about legend and urban lore and these types of things, because you can explore every depth and you can map out via satellite every square inch. And it seems like we've lost a lot of the ability to wonder about things. You know, when a plane flies over in the sky, I no longer have to wonder, well, I wonder where that plane originated or where it's going. I can pull up an app on my phone and it'll tell me. And so I think it's important from a marketing tool because this is sort of an unsolved mystery. And I think it's important from a community character point of view because not everybody has a Bigfoot story. And we do. And it's not something that a marketing agency cooked up. It's something that really happened here. And so the authenticity of it, I think, makes it special.
Awesome. Very good. What would you say? Now, I know you don't want groups of guys coming in here with guns or anything, but how do you feel about people coming here to explore the legend?
I would welcome people who want to come here and explore the legend because I think that we have a story that rivals any of the Northwestern stories, Northwestern United States, which I think a lot of people think about Bigfoot, in this case, the Big Muddy Monster. They think about pine forests and they think about Washington and Oregon and these types of places, which certainly have their stake, their claim on this legend. But I think in terms of the evidence and the amount of firsthand witnesses, I think we have as much or more as anybody does. And I would welcome people to come here. In fact, we are currently watching the development of a new hotel in Murfreesboro, and it's being built on Muddy Monster Road after this very subject that we're talking about.
Can you mention the statue?
Sure.
And why it's being built?
Well, the statue was commissioned by the hotel developer, and
kind of restate that statue of what?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
So there is a statue of the Big Muddy Monster being created at this time, and it is going to be placed near Muddy Monster Road, which is a part of a new development of a new hotel and some other things that are going to be going in. So I think that's just another example of how much the Big Muddy Monster is a part of Murfreesboro. I mean, the primary road is being named after the Big Muddy Monster and a statue is being put up. And we think that it'll draw a lot of attention, and I think that it'll be a tourist spot, and it'll be a place for people to wonder about what really happened.
Can you describe some of the tourist attractions that if someone was to explore, where would they go around here?
Well, I think a place people would go would be Riverside Park, because that's where the first sighting of the Big Muddy Monster occurred. And it's interesting, each year around Halloween, I typically do a local radio interview as they talk about the legends, spooky things in Southern Illinois. And I always drive down to that very spot where the Big Muddy Monster was first sighted, and I do the radio interview from there on my phone. So a person would go to Riverside Park with a little bit of review of the police file. They could probably find a place called Green Road, where the Big Muddy Monster was last reported having been seen in a farmer's barn. They would likely go to the police department. Our number one requested case file, of course, is the Big Muddy Monster case file, to the point to where we finally put it up on the website so that people can just access it there. It's amazing when you look at the Big Muddy Monster case file. It was reported in newspapers in South Africa, in the New York Times, in the Los Angeles Times, the Chicago Tribune, and other Chicago newspapers sent reporters here to interview residents and the police chief at the time. It was literally worldwide news. There are letters in the case file from school children to people in Germany who they said that they would be happy to come here and try to trap the monster. There were inventors who sent letters with specific designs of things that could be done to catch the Big Muddy Monster. So it was quite the news story.
So like Bigfoot stories, all that, I'm really into that. Like, I just think they're fun, you know? And I've seen documentaries and TV shows and podcasts and all that stuff. And I live here in Illinois. I live in Chatham, right next to Springfield. And I honestly am not, until I started doing this, wasn't really familiar with the story. Everybody knows about Momo, right? Why do you think? And you mentioned it was a worldwide thing for a while, but it seems to have faded. Any theory on why it's not as well known or popular as other stories?
I'm not sure why it's not as well known as other Bigfoot stories or Sasquatch stories. Certainly it's not because the community hasn't taken it up as a part of our lore and legend. We have Big Muddy Brewing here. Again, I talked about the Big Muddy Monster statue that is being erected. There's a Muddy Monster Road that has been constructed. Everyone around here knows the story. Now, it may be because the lore and legend is so West Coast centered, then this is a mud monster and hasn't over the years been called Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but the descriptions are exactly the same. And so maybe the fact that the Big Muddy Monster isn't the Big Muddy Bigfoot or Big Muddy Sasquatch may have been a reason why it didn't stick like some of the other ones have in a nationwide sense. So one of the things that's interesting about the landscape of Southern Illinois is that there's a place called the Little Grand Canyon. There are natural bridges. We are in the Mississippi River Delta. We're near the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. The Shawnee National Forest, tens of thousands of acres located here in Southern Illinois, not to mention all of the man-made lakes and reservoirs that were created over the years to service the small towns with drinking water. There's great biodiversity here. We truly experience all four seasons of spring, summer, fall, and winter, of course. And with that, we see the change of those seasons in their full glory. And we also have Crab Orchard National Wildlife Refuge, which is thousands of acres as well. So when you think about an area that could sustain a cryptoid type creature, there's certainly the space, the rural space in southern Illinois for something to go undetected for a long time.
Awesome. You don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but what's your take on that?
Well, I think it happened. I know that those people saw something that terrorized them. I've read every letter in the case file, and I'm not willing to rule out that what they saw was something very unique. Whether or not it was a Bigfoot, I don't know, but what they saw was not something that was easily mistaken for something else. And so I think that that's one of the reasons why the legend lives on, because it just cannot be easily dismissed. I think the best theory, alternate theory that people have put out was that it was a bear. And that's what many people have said over the years. Where this bear came from, who knows? But, the police, when they responded initially, they did smell something horrible. It was just a terrible smelling, pungent odor. And there was something thrashing around and making noise that was unrecognizable to them out in the wooded area near where it had been reported. So, there are credible people doing a job that saw something that they could not identify.
Was there any other lighting in the salvage yard besides your flashlights?
Well, it was a full moon that night. That was another thing. It was a full moon. We could see all the cars in the area, around there. And we really wanted the flashlight, so if there were some kids hiding, we could see them. We could find them and get them out of there,
So you're all in the garage area. Your mom has a sighting. What happens then?
Well, what we did was they kept wanting, and my wife didn't, but my mom and my sister kept wanting to kind of look around and see if they could see where it was going or get a good look at it. And I kept urging them, no, let's go and show Charlie. Charlie said that he wanted to call it a night. It really had an effect on both of us.
And did you call the police that evening?
No. We made the decision after we got away from the place not to keep it quiet. Don't tell nobody about it, because we knew in that town people would laugh at you, make jokes about you. And unfortunately, when my little brother found out, he let it slip. It was like a snowball going downhill, kept growing and growing and growing, and eventually the media found out.
Now, at the time, were you familiar with the previous year's stories about the big muddy monster in the area?
I heard a little bit about, and I was one of them to ridicule. I was actually not a believer. I didn't, I laughed and I didn't know exactly how it happened, with the couple down at Riverside Park, but I kind of made a joke and had my fun with it. And after it happened to me, I'm a believer now. I know these creatures exist.
And I remember you saying that you and Charlie tried to lure it under a motion light. Was that correct on your way back?
Yeah. When we were heading back up, we seen it. It just stepped over that fence. It stepped right over the fence. Didn't even have to push the barbed wire down or nothing. It stepped over the fence and was following us. And Charlie said he's following us. And I said, well, let's get up in the garage where it'd be safe. And when my wife and mother and sister pulled up, they said they didn't see nothing out there. 'Cause we talked about this later when we got home. I said, that thing followed us up there. You didn't see it when you pulled up with the headlights on the car? Nothing. And they said no. But they wasn't there very long when it started hitting the back of the building. And when it did that, I think it was trying to get us out or, get some kind of reaction from us.
Did you think it was trying to harm you or
No.
spook you?
If he was going to harm us, he would have done it down there. I really thought about that a lot, and Charlie did too. And if that thing really wanted to harm us, he didn't have any trouble going over that fence. He stepped right over it, and he could have been on us so quick, we wouldn't have been able to do nothing.
And how high was the fence approximately?
The fence was probably about 4 foot. And he stepped right over.
So when you left, did you the next day come back to look for any evidence?
Yeah, we did.
And find any?
We found a footprint down by the ditch along the railroad. And we measured it, measured 21 and a half inches long. It was about 8 inches at the ball of the foot and about 3.5 inches at the heel.
So from the time you and Charlie were out and you got that smell coming in of something awful, how long do you think it was before you left the area? How much time had gone on from the first encounter to you hightail it out of there?
Probably, it only took us probably 5 minutes to trot back up to the shop, but we was up there for about a good 45 minutes to an hour when we was afraid to come out and afraid to do anything while he was outside.
Yeah. Was there any noise? You said when it was banging on the shed that it was grunting or something. Was there any noise when it was following you?
He was making kind of a grunting sound outside. You could hear him. And the whole time too, we could smell that smell inside the building of him. I mean, it was rank. And he just it sounded like he just basically circled the building, because he'd hit one spot and then he'd hit another spot and then he'd hit another spot around the building. But amazingly, he didn't even touch the doorknob to the door or hit on the door. He just kept up. And there was an outside light, but I was too afraid to open the door to look out to see if I could see what he looked like underneath the light.
Yeah. So once the media gets a hold of it, then what happens?
Oh, they started calling me and all hours of the night and morning. I even got a call from Russia. Some guy, some Yeti dude over in Russia called me. I mean, and then, TV reporters showing up, and it was different. I'd never been through that before, and I really wanted to just get away from it. I did. That's one of the big reasons why I moved out of the area. That, and I got a job up here, and my wife's mother got sick. And I just wanted to get away from it. But I did meet a guy from Michigan, and about a few weeks after that, and we went down to Shawnee National Forest down in Turkey Bayou and looked around, and we found some footprints down there. So there's more than one.
Like large footprints?
Large footprints. Unfortunately, they were in snow, and he couldn't do a plaster cast. But this guy, he was a Bigfoot hunter. He knew exactly what to look for.
Yeah. Did other researchers show up, or?
Oh yeah, we had some from from SIU and some other guys from out west come in and looked around the area. Some of them took hair samples. They found hair, and they took some hair samples. And what was amazing is they took me back there, and about 12 foot off the ground in the tree line, trees at least 9 inches around snapped off. 12 foot off the ground, just snapped right off. And there was a whole bunch of them, whole lineup. And I asked him, I said, well, what would have done that? And the guy from Michigan told me, he said, that's what they do to mark their territory. And it's not for humans, it's for other Bigfoot. It's what he told me. And that was all news to me because I didn't know anything about Bigfoot.
A lot of the descriptions of the 70 sightings, the town was a circus afterwards. People lining up, looking to come and see it. Was it similar out at the Salvage?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I had people where I couldn't even run my business. I had people coming in, parked all the way out to Route 13, along my road drive coming into my business, and people just flocking, looking to see what they can see. Mm-hmm.
And now, some many decades later, as you look back, what do you think that was?
I think it was a Sasquatch. I really do. From everything that, since then, weeks afterwards, I've done, I looked into what I could find out, and all the characteristics is he's a Sasquatch.
And what, as you owned the place for years, had you encountered any other known animals that would come in through the salvage yard at all? Any deer?
We had deer come in there, smaller rodents, possums, raccoons, skunk, but never anything like this, a biped, just, walking upright like a man.
And had you had trespassers or people coming in? Because you had a security guard for...
Yeah, we had a problem with, if I impounded a vehicle, at the time I didn't have a fenced in area to keep the impounded cars for, like DUI or something that the police didn't want anybody to touch it. Sometimes people would get in there and steal stuff, break into the cars and steal stereos and stuff like that. So I had to have some way to keep them secure. So I hired Charlie to keep an eye on things, and he did a really good job doing it. And hence what happened when he heard this creature down.